Hello, everyone. This is Al Fadi, and I'd like to welcome you to a brand new video series that I believe it's going to be very interesting. The series are entitled Mount Sinai in Arabia, and the reason why we chose this is that there is this basically mountain that is found in the northwestern region of Saudi Arabia, and there is a lot of evidence that collaborate biblical accounts which, in my view, would prove strongly that that could be the real location of Mount Sinai, where Moses basically met with the Lord and many other biblical accounts and events took place. With me here, a very special friend and a dear brother. His name is Joel Richardson. And the reason why I invited Joel, because he have visited that site multiple times, and he is going also to present to you the evidence by images as well as using biblical passages to show you the collaboration between what the image is showing and what also either the map or the photos would be showing you. And of course, I've known Joel for a very long time, and I am blessed really to find this time to work with him in a video series as this. Joel, thank you so much, brother, for making the time for us. I know you're busy, and I know also you have a passion for these type of topics, and one of the areas that you focus on is biblical prophecies, and I believe this is just up your alley, basically, when it comes to that. So before we dive into this particular topic, why don't you give our viewers just a brief overview about yourself and how did you get into this particular field of prophecy, and why also dealing with Islamic issues as well.
Sure. Well, first let me say, Al-Fadi, the blessing's mine. It's good to be here with you. And
thank you, brother.
I'm looking forward to talking about these things as well. So I came to faith in 1991, and I was raised nominally Catholic, very nominally Catholic, pretty much a hedonist throughout most of my childhood years, and had a real powerful conversion at 1991. And it was shortly thereafter that a missionary had come to the church that I was going to. He was working in Kazakhstan with the poorest of the poor. I mean, he was working with lepers, and, I didn't even know lepers still existed. And he also explained this whole concept of the unreached peoples of the world. People that, hundreds of thousands of them who don't have an active witness concerning Jesus among them. And he explained at the time, again, 1991, that roughly half of the unreached peoples of the world were Muslim. It was like 48%. And the global Protestant missionary force, we were sending less than half of 1% at the time to the Muslim world. And so at the end of his sermon, just sort of in classic Pentecostal altar call form, I really felt the leading of the Lord and the calling, and I knelt down at the altar and I committed my life to the Islamic world. And so that began a 5-year journey of education, and I was getting trained and so forth. In the middle of that, 1994, I spent a year, or better part of a year, really bouncing around between Israel, Egypt, and Jordan. My base of operation was in southern Israel, and I would work construction and then take off to Egypt for a few weeks, this type of thing. So I was kind of dipping my feet in the Middle East, getting to know the people a bit, and falling in love with the Middle East and the people of the Middle East, all people. And then the next phase is what I call life happened. And what that means is I was going to school. I decided in the midst of this I was going to pursue a degree in engineering, but it's in the midst of that I met my wife. Okay, so life happens. Next thing you know, you're married and there's babies and different things like that. So throughout most of the 90s, I was just working, raising kids, and it kind of became clear during that time that we weren't going to move to the Middle East. Just didn't seem realistic at the time. But again, I was pursuing, reaching out to Muslims, dialogue with Muslims, and I really fell in love with that discussion. Okay, so I was reading books on Islam by Muslim scholars, by a lot of the classic Muslim scholars and so forth, and I was, created some discussion forums and chat groups, and it was this type of thing, the Wild West of the internet, before 9/11. But then it was after 9/11 that we saw this influx, we saw this tremendous influx of Westerners converting to Islam. And it was during that time that I really began discerning that Islam is not just another in a series of what Christians would view as a false religion. We kind of categorize it, well, if you get Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, this type of thing. But it was then that I began realizing not only is Islam the largest and fastest growing, but it's also arguably the most seductive in terms of there's a legitimate power there. And, I saw people that were raised Christians. Christians often don't like to admit it, but it's true, that were converting to Islam. And so I began discerning a bit more during that time. And then I started studying Islamic eschatology and understanding what Islam teaches in a general way about the end times. Started seeing things in the news like people being beheaded. Started sort of putting the pieces together and ended up writing a lot. I've written quite a lot over the years concerning Islam, its role in Bible prophecy, the role of the Middle East, the role of the nations that surround Israel, where they fit in biblical prophecy, and all of this. So, on one hand, obviously, from a Christian perspective, I've had some critical things to say concerning some of the things that Islam says, which are critical of Christianity. But I really do. I love Muslims. I love the Middle East. And so with regard to this issue of Mount Sinai, it was about 3 years ago that I had the chance to go into Saudi Arabia for the first time. And that's what began me on this whole journey concerning this mountain called Jebel al-Lawz. And it is arguably, I would say, the single most significant story that's unfolding in our time concerning the validation of the Bible, the validation of biblical archaeology, and it's beginning to become big news, but it's going to become far greater news in the years ahead.
And when did that take place? You visited that mountain? Was it recent or?
So we're in 2020. I guess it was actually March of 20. I'm not sure it was 17 or 18.
Okay, so it's recent basically. What brought it to your attention, by the way, the fact that that could be the location of the mountain?
Yeah, so I mean, as an itinerant preacher, a lot of people come up to me and they show me pictures of this or that. And I've had people show me over the years. There's various Americans that have slipped in and kind of investigated this over the years. And I'd heard about it, but I just didn't have the bandwidth. I didn't have the ability to really dig into this. People were like, what do you think about this? And every time I saw it, this prayer would kind of rise up in me, and I would say, Lord, I ask that you would get me into Saudi Arabia. I really want to check this out, even though archaeology is kind of outside of my area of specialty. And of course, up until just last year, no one can go into Saudi Arabia unless you have a work visa.
Right.
You need a reason. And so I had a friend that had visited the mountain. He works in the kingdom with one of the oil companies. And I just said, hey, can you get me a visa? Can you get me in? And he said, well, I can arrange for you as a photographer to come in and do some promotional work. And, we'll hire you. And in the process, we can go do some exploring. And I said, let's do it. And so that's what began the journey. And of course, then in light of it, that's when I really started digging in and doing the research. That's when I started looking at all of the historical, all of the academic literature that's both critical of this mountain as the real Mount Sinai and that's in favor of it, and started exploring all of this stuff. And after going there and after working through all the material pretty tediously for about a year, I'm absolutely, completely confident that this is the real Mount Sinai. And I've had the chance to go back since then. And as soon as this COVID thing is over, I'm looking forward to getting back there again as well.
So why don't you tell our viewers then about this particular series? What should they expect as we begin to unfold, basically, the study and the location and all the other evidence that support that?
So there's a tremendous amount of evidence. And again, for those that are just learning about this subject, there's a lot of information to weed through. And so what I always try to do is, as I said, work through all of the popular literature as well as the academic literature, and then try to boil the academic scholarly stuff down to its simple, most important points so that anybody who's interested can understand it. They can understand the arguments for and against. I like people to be Bereans. I don't try to force anything on anyone, but that's what I'm saying. This mountain sells itself. So we'll work through the historical and traditional evidences. And by the way, there are a handful of other Mount Sinai candidates. There's the traditional site. There's another mountain up in the Negev, southern Israel, that some people It's called Har Karkum, that some people speculate could be the real Mount Sinai, etc. There's a handful. And so, I try to lay out all the evidence and let people come to their own conclusions, but we'll work through the historical, traditional, the geologic evidences, the archaeological evidences that are seen in the petroglyphs, some of the rock carvings that are around the mountain, some of the I mean, there's just a lot. There's an abundance of evidences, and
Absolutely.
when it's all laid out,
yeah.
it's an amazing case. It really is.
Well, that's great. I'm looking forward to it, and I think people are going to enjoy really at least assessing the evidence. Again, like Joel mentioned, we're not here to force our interpretation into you, but I think, as I was convinced myself by looking at the evidence, looking at the pictures, by looking at the biblical passages, there is a compelling set of evidence to really point to this particular mountain. And of course, I have to admit I'm a little biased because it's in Saudi, where I come from. But its location is really peculiar when it comes to its association with Midian, and also the possible location of the crossing over the Red Sea and so many other things. So with that in mind, brother, thank you so much, of course, for giving us this introductory episode about what the show will be about, or the series would be about. And I'm looking forward now to the next one, where we begin to lay out these evidence and also what the Bible says about that location. Amen. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, this series is called Mount Sinai in Arabia, and hopefully you will join us, myself and our dear brother Joel Richardson. And in fact, Joel, before we even close this particular episode, I will be remiss if I do not remind people about your ministry and maybe mention some of your books that even relate to the framework of what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I actually did write a book on this and released it last year. It's just called Mount Sinai in Arabia. You can get that on Amazon. You can also get it on my website if you want a signed copy. And so online, I can be found at joelstrumpet.com.
Very good. There you go. And hopefully we'll make an effort to try to find some of the images of your book, and we'll show it to people as well. So thank you, brother, and thank you, everyone. Until we meet again, have a blessed day. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. We can't make these quality videos without the help of partners like you. So please consider becoming a Patreon supporter today at patreon.com/CIRA International. I want to make sure you always get notified when we release a new video. So please click the bell to be notified, and of course, make sure to subscribe to this channel. If this video was helpful to you, please click the thumbs up. Thank you.